The key turned in the lock of room 13, a door Sarah swore she'd never open again. The metallic jangle echoed down the dimly lit corridor of Pine Valley storage, a sound that felt sharp and violating in the damp silence. Sarah Monroe froze before the door, her breath forming tiny clouds in the cold, stagnant air. Her hands trembled violently as she inserted the cold brass key. 5 years. She whispered to herself, the number a heavy stone in her stomach. I swore I'd never look back, never disturb the dust of the life I fled. She hadn't expected the past to demand to be acknowledged so loudly. The air smelled of concrete and forgotten things, a smell that scraped against her manufactured calm. The door creaked open like old bones protesting, dust particles swirling instantly in the weak shaft of hallway light. The smell hit first a musty, cloying cardboard scent, tinged strongly with the ghost of a rich, floral perfume she didn't recognize, an expensive scent that didn't belong to her memories. Boxes lined the walls like tombstones of a past she truly didn't remember living. Wedding photos smiled back from cracked frames, a dizzying, joyful image of her and Greg that now looked like a carefully staged lie. She saw her own face, but the happiness reflected in her eyes felt alien, a mask she had worn without knowing the role. Greg's expensive watch, a silver automatic, gleamed from a velvet box she knew she never owned, a piece of luxury that hinted at wealth she hadn't earned. But it was the leather-bound diary that made her blood run instantly cold. It was heavy, meticulously kept, and she knew with terrifying certainty that Sarah Monroe never kept a diary. She opened it with shaking hands. The handwriting wasn't hers, it was elegant, looping, and purposeful. Day 1, she thinks she's safe. Day 15, found her new address. Day 30, time to take back what's mine. The chilling entries were direct, almost surgical. A folded note, heavy with its own implied threat, fell from the pages. Sarah unfolded it. You stole my life, and I'm taking it back. She dropped it instantly as if it had burned her fingers. In the ensuing silence, slow, deliberate footsteps echoed outside, moving down the concrete corridor. Someone's here. Her whisper barely reached her own ears, swallowed by the cavernous unit. She waited, heart hammering against her ribs like a desperate drum, until the heavy footsteps faded into nothing. Her fingers brushed over a glossy photo inside a half-open box, and for a fleeting, horrifying moment, her mind flickered with a distinct memory she didn't recognize: a lively party, a brightly decorated cake, loud, careless laughter. But the laughter wasn't hers. It was Emily's. The next morning at Atlanta General Hospital, Sarah moved through her nursing routine like a sleepwalker, every action mechanical and distanced. The emergency ward's usual chaos, the screaming sirens, the rhythmic beeping of monitors usually grounded her, forcing focus. But today every shadow hid a threat. Every hurried step sounded like the ones in the storage unit. She'd been a dedicated nurse here for 3 years, long enough to feel competent in the face of death, short enough to still feel intensely vulnerable to her own history. Lena Martinez approached, steam rising from her coffee cup, her usual bright energy slightly dimmed but intensely inquisitive. Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost. Late night with Dr. Dreamy? Lena joked, but her eyes held a genuine probing concern. Just couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind, a little stress, Sarah replied, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. Inside, she was replaying the words of the diary, searching Lena's open face for any sign of deception, any connection to the terror. Want to talk about it? You know I'm here for you, especially after everything you've been through. Sarah froze, the coffee cup halfway to her lips. The phrase "everything you've been through" felt loaded, too specific to be a coincidence. Sarah had never told Lena the real, messy story of leaving Greg and starting over. How could Lena know there wasn't everything? Dr. Tom Harrison appeared suddenly beside them, his presence solid and reliable. "Morning, ladies. Sarah, you're on trauma rotation today. Think you can handle whatever comes through those doors?" "I can handle anything," she said. The words meant to be defiant, but her phone buzzed immediately in her scrub pocket. Unknown number. The text froze her blood. Room 13 was just the beginning. Everything okay?" "You look like you just saw Priority 1 trauma," Tom asked, noticing the way the color had drained from her face. "Perfect. Just perfect," she forced out, shoving the phone away. But Lena's gaze lingered a fraction too long, a flicker of something unreadable pity or suspicion crossing her features. Sarah felt an icy certainty. Lena knew something about E. Sarah tried desperately to focus on her work, but the hospital seemed to blur around her. Every patient, every worried relative, every passing doctor morphed momentarily into Emily's ghostly image. That night, back in her sterile, quiet apartment, she spread the entire contents of room 13 across her living room floor. Boxes, crumpled papers, old bills, faded photos. Each item was a piece of a story she hadn't written and didn't remember living. It was like wearing someone else's skin, itchy and wrong. A bank statement revealed monthly deposits she never received, totaling tens of thousands of dollars, coming from a company she never knew existed, Whitmore Holdings. The deposits were meticulous, signed off with a signature that was unsettlingly close to her own, yet clearly forged. A tarnished engagement ring, an antique sapphire, sat in its velvet box like a warning. The financial trail was clear. Someone had been living her life, but with another's income. This wasn't identity theft. It was identity substitution. Her laptop chimed, breaking the heavy silence. It was Jenny, her younger sister, on a prearranged video call from across the country. "Do you remember anyone named Emily?" Sarah asked carefully, trying to keep her voice level. "Emily? No. Why? Is she a new doctor?" Jenny replied, genuine confusion clear in her expression. Sarah realized the depth of the deception. Emily had erased herself so completely that even her own sister knew nothing. Before Sarah could explain the terrifying finds, a soft scrape at her apartment door made her freeze, every muscle tensing. Shadows moved in the peephole, but nothing appeared. She waited rigid until she heard retreating footsteps, then cautiously opened the door to discover a large, manila envelope on the floor. Inside, a single high-resolution photographed her face, but the setting was a life she hadn't led. Below it, a professionally printed card, Emily Reeves. 1989 to 2018, the life you're living should have been hers. Sarah read, her knees buckling as the full reality hit her. The next day, the fear was paralyzing. Sarah couldn't focus. Patients and charts blurred into Emily's ghostly image. During a frantic lunch break, she Googled Emily Reeves missing 2018 and found a handful of obscure articles connecting Emily's sudden disappearance with David Martinez, Lena's older brother. Emily's uncanny resemblance to her, down to the exact shade of their hair and the small mole above their lips, was undeniable in the old photos. Lena's specific, knowing comments, David Martinez's involvement, the diary, everything clicked into a chilling, cohesive picture of betrayal. Lena, I need to ask you about your brother David. Sarah confronted her colleague in the empty break room, her voice shaking with controlled terror. Lena's half-finished coffee mug slipped from her grasp, shattering on the tile floor, its contents splashing everywhere. What about him? Lena asked, her tone instantly defensive, her eyes wide with carefully masked panic. Was he engaged to Emily Reeves? Color drained from Lena's face, leaving it sickly pale. How do you know that name? You should know that name. Someone thinks I'm her. Someone thinks I stole her life. Maybe even your brother's life, Sarah explained, gesturing vaguely toward the unknown forces closing in. Maybe you did, Lena whispered, the accusation hanging heavy in the air, a devastating confirmation. She straightened, composing herself with visible effort, and left the room without helping clean the mess. Some secrets are buried for a reason. Sarah, sometimes it's safer to let them stay. There, the confession was a profound wound. Sarah realized she'd been working alongside a keeper of the secret, an unknowing guard of Greg's trap. Sarah spent the night in an intense, furious research session, digging into Greg Whitaker, her ex-husband. She uncovered a massive, insidious web of manipulation she hadn't imagined: shell corporations, real estate fraud, and identity schemes. Emily's life, her substantial inherited money, even her initial identity documents had been gradually eroded and erased by Greg's insidious years-long influence. It became clear that Greg was not merely abusive. He was an identity predator. Sarah realized the leather-bound diary wasn't a recent threat, it was a warning left long ago. Emily had tried to fight back, leaving meticulous clues in case she failed, leaving a trail for someone who could survive. Tom found Sarah early the next morning in the hospital parking lot, slumped in her car, tears of exhaustion and revelation drying on her cheeks. She told him everything: the storage unit, the diary, Emily's photo, Lena's strange involvement. Tom's expression darkened with every detail. There's something I need to tell you about Emily, he confessed, his voice low and tight with remembered concern. I treated her here 3 years before she disappeared. She came in with injuries she said were from a fall, a clumsy accident, but I knew better. Classic signs of domestic violence, but she was too terrified to admit it. Her boyfriend's name then was Greg Whitaker. The pieces collided with sickening finality. Greg, her ex-husband, was Emily's abuser. Her phone buzzed, vibrating violently on the dashboard. Unknown number. Distorted, electronically altered voice. Hello, darling. Miss me? The line went dead. Sarah couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Emails arrived from aireeves2018@gmail.com. Want to know what really happened? Meet at room 13 tomorrow at midnight. Come alone or the police get very. Interesting photos of you with my identification. Attached were photos she didn't. Remember taking images of her using a driver's license with Emily Reeves' name. Doubt crept in. Those hazy, traumatized missing months after she left Greg. Had she unknowingly stepped directly into the final part of Emily's desperate plan? She chose to respond to the Emily email, I'll be there. But I want answers, not threats. At a quiet diner that night, Tom laid out what his own research had uncovered. Greg had multiple, highly convincing identities, running complex scams across state lines, using women like pawns as unknowing fronts for money laundering. Emily's bank records showed a continuous history of forged signatures that resembled Sarah's. Tom suggested a shocking possibility. Emily hadn't meant for Sarah to steal her life. Emily had meticulously tried to become Sarah first, before Greg forced Sarah to become Emily's life's counterpart. Greg's manipulation ran deep years of grooming, planning, and observing them both. Sarah realized the Room 13 meeting wasn't for answers, but a calculated trap, the climax of Greg's careful, deadly design. She and Tom approached the storage unit complex at 11 p.m. The facility seemed menacing. The shadows deepened in absolute, and distant sirens echoed an uneasy warning. The door to Room 13 was already open, inviting them into the darkness. Inside, boxes were arranged, not stacked, forming a macabre shrine. Photos of Emily, many defaced with scratched-out faces, covered the walls. Lena emerged from behind a high stack of furniture boxes, her face tear-streaked and resolute. "You actually came," she said, her voice sharp and broken, her eyes hard with grief. "Lena, how are you here?" Sarah asked, confusion replacing fear. "The same way I've been everywhere you've been, watching, or should I call you Emily?" Lena's tone was accusatory. Tom stepped forward, his body shielding Sarah. "What's going on, Lena?" Lena explained the truth, finally finding release for her burden. Sarah hadn't stolen Emily's identity. Emily had stolen Sarah's life first, briefly, desperately trying to hide from Greg. Greg had manipulated every single event, every clue, using both women as interchangeable pieces in a larger financial game. Emily's disappearance, Lena's observation, the diary, it had all been carefully orchestrated by Greg to control the narrative. Heavy footsteps echoed directly behind them. Greg appeared in the doorway, confident, dangerous, holding a glinting black gun. Well. Isn't this a cozy little reunion? I should have known Tom would stick his nose in. "Greg," Sarah whispered, the name tasting like ash. "Hello, darling. You look healthier. Emily's little lifestyle suited you, didn't it? It's a shame to end it." "Stay back," Tom warned, stepping into the line of sight. Greg taunted them, his voice chillingly calm, revealing that Emily was indeed dead, showing grainy newspaper clippings he'd kept as trophies, recounting in detail how he killed her to protect his business and his forged life. Lena's face collapsed. She realized the true depth of his plan. Sarah was the final piece, a clean, legally established identity to replace the messy Emily and cover all his crimes. Greg casually raised the gun, sighting on Sarah. Sarah's hospital trauma training finally kicked in, overriding the terror. She spotted a heavy crowbar glinting under a pile of rubble. Tom understood her glance immediately. Chaos erupted. Tom lunged. Gunfire cracked the air, boxes tumbled violently, light bulbs shattered in the struggle, and absolute darkness momentarily engulfed Room 13. In the desperate, scrambling fight, Sarah found herself holding the gun, the cold metal heavy and final in her hand, her finger tightening on the trigger. Her heart raced, but she chose not to kill. "Tom, call the police." "Now," she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. The struggle continued briefly until Greg, knowing he was outnumbered, fled into the dark corridors. 2 weeks later, following Emily's meticulous financial preparation and the evidence Sarah had uncovered, police arrested Greg. Charges: fraud, identity theft, and murder. Sarah watched the news coverage, feeling hollow, haunted by Emily's courage and sacrifice. Greg's trial dominated the local news cycle for months, a sordid saga of betrayal and forgery. He was defiant, showing no remorse, maintaining that Emily had simply run away and Sarah was an accomplice. The hospital buzzed with whispers. Tom was called to testify about Emily's domestic violence history, and Lena was briefly suspended pending an investigation into her brother David's minor but related financial crimes. The legal battle left Sarah completely drained, forcing her to take a temporary leave of absence from Atlanta General. It wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was the sheer weight of realizing her entire adult life had been a script written by a criminal. Tom joined her later. "How are you holding up?" "I think about Emily every day. She died trying to protect me. If I'd stayed with Greg and hadn't run, you'd likely be dead too," he reminded her, his hand resting on her shoulder. She planned carefully. "Sarah, you survived because you ran and unknowingly picked up her trail." Lena approached, remorseful and broken. Sarah listened to her, acknowledging the complexity of her choices, driven by fear and loyalty to her brother David, whom Greg had also implicated in small-time money transfers. Lena confessed that Greg had threatened David to ensure she kept quiet about Emily's connection to their family. "Emily was tracking others," Lena whispered one afternoon, while they were sorting through files the police had released. "Women Greg had used and discarded. Before you and Emily, he called them his assets, Emily. Was building a list, a network of people who could expose them if anything happened to her." This revelation added a new, terrible layer to Emily's sacrifice. She was not fighting just for herself, but for others she might never meet. Forgiveness was not immediate or easy, but understanding grew slowly as Lena provided crucial, encrypted data Emily had left behind, detailing victims in other states. Months later, Sarah moved into a sunlit new apartment across town, deliberately severing her ties with the places Greg had polluted. Room 13 was officially closed and sealed by the police, soon to be rented out to another unsuspecting stranger. Emily's diary remained, a testament to her profound courage and meticulous planning. Tom arrived, affirming his love for Sarah, a love distinct from any lingering guilt he felt over not saving Emily sooner. They began the slow, careful process of building a relationship based on honesty and survival, not shared trauma. 6 months later, at the Pine Valley storage facility, Sarah signed the final paperwork releasing her claim to room 13, feeling a definitive closure. The manager, a new face, mentioned that the Reeves family had been making polite, persistent inquiries about the contents of the unit, hoping for a final piece of Emily. This renewed effort by Emily's family chilled Sarah. It was a reminder that the pain lingered. She knew Emily's story was not just a closed case file, but a living wound. That night, she finally burned the diary in her apartment fireplace, watching the expensive leather and elegant handwriting curl into smoke, releasing Emily's struggle. As the last pages turned to ash, a small, tightly laminated note, protected from the flames by a heavy clasp Emily had engineered, fell out. "There's another you out there. Room 27, when you're ready to help the others." A friend who escaped. The message was cryptic yet undeniably clear. Room 27 was another storage unit, another life waiting to be uncovered, and a friend who escaped suggested a former victim, perhaps one of the assets Lena mentioned, who was now carrying on Emily's desperate work. Sarah picked up the key that was taped to the note, its edges cold and sharp, looking at Tom asleep beside her, finally peaceful. She could choose to destroy this last clue, protect her hard-won peace and safety, and settle into the quiet life Tom offered. Or she could acknowledge the call of duty left by a dead woman and step up to help others still trapped in Greg's sprawling web, the ones who didn't know they needed saving yet. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, The scent of the burned diary stinging her nostrils, she chose action. The police had Greg, but they hadn't dismantled the entire network he built. Some battles were worth fighting, even after winning her own freedom. She dressed quietly, slid the key and the note into her pocket, and kissed Tom's forehead. As she stepped into the cold night and the anonymity of the city, she felt the weight of Emily's legacy settle upon her. The fight for others had just begun. A shadow war fought in the quiet corners of the world. The wind carried whispers of lives waiting to be saved, and Sarah walked toward them, fearless, determined, and profoundly alive. She had her nurse's training, her renewed focus, and the meticulous blueprint of Emily Reeves. She was ready for room 27,